Hello, one and all. Those of you who stand in the light, those of you who stand in the shadow, and those of you who hold both well in balance, I salute you. And I want to share with you more about intuitive development and how you can best find your way in this journey, which requires that you dip into the deep unconscious realm, the unseen realm, and the shadow realm, and how you can traverse this territory and come up strong, integrated, aligned, and at peace within yourself. So I like to compare it to the W curve in cross-cultural adjustment that I discovered while I was pursuing my master's degree in international communications. And I had the good fortune of an inspiring professor who shared the studies of Zeller and Mosier on cross-cultural adjustment and this W curve. This was a study that was conducted in the early 1990s when I was pursuing that degree. And it basically charted university students who transplanted to foreign countries to study and what kind of culture shock experience they went through and how they came to adjust. And it also came to be applicable for business people who would travel overseas and how they adjusted if they were relocating to a foreign country. So it's an interesting parallel with psychic and intuitive development, because in both cases, you are going to places you've never gone before and encountering a whole nother terrain, a whole nother point of reference, or many points of reference that are different from your own, from those that you were born into. So most of us are born into the normal everyday world that is primarily a logical, linear surface world, and the psychic realm or intuitive realm is the unseen, subconscious, other world, the nether world, let's say. And you could, in that world, encounter spirits, entities, shadows, deep demons, and so on. So you have to be brave to go there. And it's the same in cross-cultural encounters. You have to be brave to move to another country, especially when it's a different language than your own. But even in the case of me, who I've explored both the intuitive realm and foreign countries. I've been living in Ireland 23 years, but was a native Californian, lived in America the first 30 years of my life. And so I have found that even in a culture such as Ireland, where there is English speaking, it is a vastly different culture from the American one. And you only know that by being in a place long enough. So what is this W curve journey? So we follow the track of the W, one point up to the next, one point down, and then up again, right? So at the very beginning of that W, it is a kind of high. You're excited, you're thrilled to be going on a new adventure, having a new experience, learning new things, and it's all go. And and you step forward with a lot of stereotypes and preconditioned ideas about what that culture might be like. And similarly with intuitive development, you have a kind of an idea, okay, I'm going to become an intuitive and be enlightened and come into all this consciousness, and it's going to be amazing. So we get really excited. And, you know, whether it's a discovery of tarot cards or astrology, or the pyramids of Egypt or whatever, you're discovering the interest is there, and you're keen, and you're relatively open at the start. But as you go into it, you arrive and you start exploring deeper, and you start dipping down into the W first arm, down to that lower point, this descending beneath the surface of things, suddenly makes you confront many things you didn't suspect. And in cross-cultural relations, we also refer to that as the iceberg theory, that, you know, initially you only see this little teeny tiny point above the surface of the water. But if you were to go below the surface, there's this massive iceberg, right? And like in Titanic, that's why the Titanic sunk, because it had no clue there was this massive iceberg beneath. Well, it's the same in cross-cultural adjustment, and the same in psychic intuitive development, that you have no clue what you're getting into and how massive the body of ice, the body of the unknown aspects of what you're exploring are. And these are essentially belief systems, social cultural conditionings, and historical and economic differences, and so on. Many different points of reference that arise as you go deeper, and you're suddenly aware, wow, what is this? It's a bit frightening. It's scary. You don't know if you can handle it. There you are in this subterrane, and it's dark and unusual. So what happens in that is most people hit an emotional low. So when you're going to another country, you might experience homesickness, for example, and say, wait a minute, this is not what I expected. Get me out of here. So that bottom dip of the W is a flight or fright response. And the same in psychic intuitive development, because as you go into it, it brings up your own shadow stuff, or the shadow phenomena around you. And it can be very disturbing and upsetting. And for me, for example, I was born and raised in California, got my bachelor's in international relations, went over to Washington, D.C., and little did I know that was the murder capital of America. I soon learned more murders and crime than in New York City, believe it or not. So suddenly I had to be on the alert. But not only that, I, at the time, was exploring my intuitive development, exploring using the tarot cards and astrology and so on. And as you go into it, your senses heighten. And certainly when we're in a foreign place or a place of the unknown, our alert system goes up. And when you're doing psychic development or intuitive development, you might start seeing things you weren't prepared to. For example, in Washington, D.C., I suddenly seemed to have bionic vision. I could suddenly see the guns and knives in people's pockets walking down the street. And of course, America is a culture of guns. And this was very frightening indeed. And I also nearly could see people naked. So I was like, okay, am I going crazy? What's happening here? Yet, you know, I was normal in all other respects. So I shut it down. I said, okay, this is too much for me. It's overwhelming. And I began to pull back. And that's what happens in this flight or fright mode. The fright kind of paralyzes you or puts you in a state of shock. And in the case of foreign cultures, it's culture shock. And you're not quite sure how to respond to that new environment. People that might have a different sense of humor than you, for example, they don't get your jokes, or, you know, that would be a lighter way to look at things, just as a small example. But then most people shoot back up the W. So you go to the next top point again, and you, if you come up too quickly, it's also a bit shocking and startling. And you say, okay, this isn't for me, so get me out of here, or you have an adverse reaction. And so you come back to the normal point, the midpoint of that W, and say, okay, everything's all right. I'm okay. The world's okay. Nothing has to change. And you sit up there at the middle point, the top of the W, for a while maybe. It's different for different people. Some people might never want to go back down in, and then you just accomplished a V. V for victory. I'm okay. I'm normal. But if you are a curious person with something in your belly, something in your heart that compels you to keep exploring, you'll eventually roll back into it. And that's indeed what happened to me, both with a foreign culture in Ireland. I thought I might only be here a year. And lo and behold, it had a way of drawing me in, Dublin, meaning the dark pool, drawing me back into its depths of experience. And then same with psychic and intuitive development. I couldn't help but be curious and continue back in the journey, even though it was frightening. It's a bit like childbirth as well. I mean, childbirth is scary as hell, painful as hell, and I didn't use painkillers, but it is incredible, absolutely incredible. And of course, we women who go through childbirth forget the pain and do it again. And so I have 2 children. But it's the same with intuitive development and those who love foreign cultures, that even though you might hit cultural differences that alarm you, that shock you, that even turn you off because you don't know how to relate to those differences. If you are curious and intrigued by differences, because differences, diversity creates new ideas, new visions, new inspiration, collaborations. Diversity is creativity. So for those of us who like to be creative, we can't help ourselves. So then you venture back down the W again, the second V of it. And you go, the next time though, most people go a little more well-armed. So in cross-cultural adjustment, there's something called transferred cues, that you can take references from your old life and bring them with you to the new culture to comfort you, to soothe you. For example, photographs of loved ones or where you were living before, favorite objects, favorite crystals, whatever. It's the same with intuitive development. You can bring your tools with you, your white sage to purify yourself, your crystals, you can call on your guides or your angels, or use your protective energetic field tools. You can read a lot, and you can read about a foreign culture. You can study the language. You can, and with the intuitive development, you can read up on more books, watch videos like this, to help you along the tracks. And yes, then you're more willing to dive down in there and maybe even take a guide with you, somebody you trust, a friend, a mentor, like myself, and let them hold your hand a bit as you traverse deeper into the subconscious realm or the foreign culture realm. And so then once you're going down, now you have to be aware you're going to hit the low point again, but this time with more consciousness, more awareness. So when you hit that low point, it's in psychic and intuitive development, it's confronting the shadow side of things, your own shadow, which could be the scariest indeed, your own vulnerabilities, your own weaknesses, your own fears, and how you can become what you fear. And a lot of times people they can become what they fear as a way to overcome it. And that's part of the shadow integration work. But better yet, is to embrace your shadow side, own it, your own vulnerabilities, your own fearful side, and come into a better state of being where you begin to own that part, integrate it, so that it's not something external you're fearing. So at this point, you know, when I went through this in my journey, and confronted my own shadow, owned it, held it with all my compassion, it's no longer something that has to act out externally. I'm not afraid of entities or ghosts or anything on the other side. I'm not afraid of death even. I mean, because I've encountered these energies. I understand they exist equally with all else, and they are part of me. And I accept everything. So acceptance is key. And the same with another culture, of course, that if you're going to live in another country, you've got to come to accept the people with their different backgrounds and cultures and learn to live with them, and accept that by living in another culture, you're going to change and you're going to become a bit different as well. And you have to be willing to be flexible, adaptable, and versatile. And same in psychic and intuitive development. If you are rigid in your ways, you'll have a breakdown for sure. So that can happen at that second low of the W point. So if somebody had a breakdown, okay, it's flight or fright again and back up to the center of the W. But if you're willing to integrate everything and bring it all into an understanding and an empathy with what you're experiencing without losing yourself and completely. You don't have to become the foreigner. You don't have to become what you feared. No, you can love and accept and be compassionate and accept the differences also. You don't have to become the difference. You can just accept it and honor and respect it. And then you can rise back up that W and get to the other side, which let's say W is for wholeness. It's this integration of everything. And when you make your way back up again, you're all the wiser, of course. You're seasoned, you're wise, because you've been down to the dark side twice. Another really important aspect of that is the second time you hit the dip is also a surrender of ego. That you can't be arrogant and say, you know, my culture is better than that culture. I mean, there's people who do that, of course, but they're only going to end up in antagonism and negativity. They will not be integrated and at peace with what they've encountered. And to be in your true intuitive development, you need to be at peace, because it's only when we're peace and calm state of being that we can channel in more purely and authentically truths, wisdom, guidance for others, if you so desire to offer that. So it's really important that you create a clean, clear, calm space within. And in that state of being, you can enjoy everything more too. And you don't have to live in reaction, like flight or fright energies. So you have to surrender the ego and let go, let go, let go, in order to be more respectful and honoring of others and other realms, unlike your own, and not to fear the so-called demons. Demon, by the way, in Latin is knowledge. So if you understand something and know something, it's no longer going to threaten you and be adverse to you. I have another funny story. I had one client on an Easter Friday one year who came to see me in a big old Georgian holistic center here in Dublin on the 3rd floor, and nobody was in the building but me and this strange fellow who showed up. And in the middle of the session, 30 minutes into it, he asked me point blank, if you had a serial killer come to you for a reading, would you accept him and serve him? And ooh, that was a shocking question. Suddenly my heart began to flutter and beat really fast. But I remained calm, cool, and collect on the outside. And I said, well, of course I would serve him with all my compassion, as I serve all people without judgment. And my heart's beating away. I'm thinking, okay, is this a silly serial killer here? Why is this guy asking me this question? What is his motive and intention? And I could have acted with fright or flight and terminated the reading, got out of the building quick or whatever. But my instinct said, stay calm. And I even instructed him to get onto the plinth. And I would do a healing straight away because, okay, if he had murderous thoughts, I'll do a healing. I stayed empowered. Some might think I was foolish, but my instincts and intuition instructed me otherwise. So I got to work, only worked on his feet, stayed far away from his hands and head, and did some calming techniques on him to calm, center, balance his energies so that they would be more benign in the face of me. And he was very curious, asking me a few questions. He had ninja socks on those feet, which was interesting. Yeah, I'm a ninja expert black belt, he was telling me, to add to the fear mongering. But anyway, the point is, in the end, we left on amicable terms. He left the building, I left the building, all was well. And years later, he has returned to me again and again, because I said, okay, he can return to me, but next time I'll only see him in the day, or only see him when there's other people around and there's more of a security and safety. And that's what I did. But in the long run, this was a great guy, and he's come to many of my sessions, workshops, and retreats over the years, and he's good as gold, pure of heart, and fabulous. But who knows what was really happening on that day. But the point is, you can transform everything. You can work with all energies, bring light and shadow into balance, no matter who's in your path, and be at peace. And I hope you will too. And if you need coaching or guidance in your intuitive development, I'm happy to be there for you, at your service always. Take care.